Hi YouTube, I'm Code Gorilla, and this is Anodyne 2 Return to Dust, any percent. I'm putting this together as a marathon submission video for various marathons who have submissions in fall 2022. It is currently August 21st, 2022, and we're going to do an any percent run of Anodyne 2 Return to Dust. I've got the Switch version here, which is actually important for a couple of the tricks we're going to be doing. Real quick, before I get started with anything else, there is a minor photosensitivity warning with this run. There is a trick that I do in several places throughout the run called pause gliding that involves rapidly pausing and unpausing the game in order to extend the horizontal distance of a glide. If you are sensitive to rapidly cycling screens, you'll want to look away at those times. I'm going to try to warn you as they come up. But other than that, we can get started. I'm going to go through the settings real quick. Okay, so camera distance and speed are good. Double health and invincibility have to be off for this to be a valid run. Save on, skip dialogue on. It even says for speed runs. I don't want my buttons to be flipped. And we're going to play this in simplified Chinese because it has the least amount of text overall. And with all of that out of the way, we can go ahead and get started in... I have to remember to first turn on global hotkeys on live splits. Sorry about that. Okay, now we can get started in 3, a 2, a 1, a go. So right off the bat, we're going to have a bit of a cutscene here, and we're actually going to skip the second half of this cutscene by jumping out of the cutscene trigger as the second that we get control of our character. And that's going to look a little something like this. And from there, we are on into the tutorial of the game. The tutorial gives you a general feel for the main gameplay loop of this game, which is you explore a 3D world to find entrances into this 2D world. You explore the 2D world to get collectibles, normally dust and cards, and then you turn in those collectibles in the 3D world to unlock more parts of the 3D world. Rinse and repeat. Your primary method of interacting with the game is a vacuum cleaner. You can suck up enemies and blocks and dust and shoot them out at other things. And right off here, we're going to do our first glitch of the game, which is a pause float. It looks like that. That was a very small one. I'm going to be doing a bigger one in a minute, but essentially the way it works is if you jump and then immediately pause, you maintain your momentum while the game is paused. So as long as you leave the game paused, you will gain arbitrary amounts of height. We use that all over the place, and that's the reason we're playing on the Switch version, because this glitch only exists on the Switch port of this game. So we're going to be doing another one of those right here to get over this cliff. 1, 2, 3. And they're all different lengths, so you just kind of have to memorize how long you have to go for. Thankfully, there is a in-game timer on the pause screen, so you can easily time out how long you've been paused for. That's very important for one later that we actually do for like 25-ish seconds. We're just finishing up the tutorial here. This gives you the idea of another common gameplay element here, which is just, hey, here's a split path. You actually have to do both halves of it. It's a pattern that they use all over the place. And with that, we are pretty much done with the tutorial. Normally what would follow after this is a tutorial boss, but we're actually going to skip that as well by doing another pause float. Not that one that's coming up in a minute. It's kind of a precise one. You gotta get it at a very specific angle to get out of the... So, the way the game tries to force you into the boss fight is to trap you inside a set of invisible walls. But they don't give you an invisible ceiling, so you can kind of just float on out of there. And that's exactly what we're going to do. So that's coming up here. While I'm doing that, I'm going to be setting up for the next trick by changing some settings in the menu. The next trick is called a save float. It works exactly the same as a pause float, but you do it with a save dialog option instead of a pause menu. And the reason we do that, the reason to do that is because you get to actually see what you're doing instead of being on a pause screen the entire time. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. There we go. Threaded the needle. And now we can just double back and jump over the invisible walls and just leave via the normal elevator. So the setting that I changed is I turned off text skip. And that's so that when we interact with the save point in just a second here, the dialog box will actually stay up, and that allows us to do the save float. So that looks like this. You jump and then you immediately save, and now we get to just soar all the way into the air. At the top of this, we're going to be doing our first pause glide, so photosensitivity warning. And as I mentioned earlier, it involves pausing and unpausing the game repeatedly to extend the distance, horizontal distance you get. So that looks something like this. I need to change the setting back. And these are some debug cutscene triggers that were left in. And doing this, we actually drove through 2 of them at roughly the same time. So we're stacking 2 different cutscenes here. One of them is repairing the prism, and the other is clearing the storm that was above the city. Neither of those we should be able to do yet. Normally, repairing the prism requires having 4 cards to upgrade the prism, and clearing the city requires having a prism full of 100 dust, which requires you to upgrade the prism at least once. But we just skipped all that. That said, for a future part of the game, we actually need all the cards we can get, so I'm still going around and collecting the first 4 cards that we would otherwise have theoretically skipped. So that's what we're doing now. We're going into our first main gameplay area. If you think of this as like a Zelda-like game, this would be our first dungeon, or first level, however you want to look at it. Every one of these is preceded by one of these rhythm mini games. You just hold the arrow in the direction of the crystal to block it. They're auto-scrollers. As long as you don't screw up, you'll be fine. I don't talk as well while doing them because I will screw up the auto-scrollers, and that just, it loses time. And they're pretty easy, so it's kind of silly to lose time on them, but that's what happens if I try to give commentary throughout the entire thing. In any case, this is Mysterio Weisel. Mysterio Weisel introduces a couple of enemies. We have these old slimes that have gas clouds like that. We have pea shooters that will track you and shoot you like that. But you can trick them into shooting switches like so. The main thing we have are innocent slimes, which if they die for any reason, it will pop up a gate to block your progress and you'll have to reset the screen. The thing is, when I say any reason, I mean any reason. They are extremely fragile and will die if you so much as walk into them. So like there, we have to stall for a little bit so the shooter didn't shoot it. Here we just have to make sure we walk around them while still taking care of the spike to unblock our path. In a later room, it's going to be actually faster to intentionally fail. Use one of the innocent slimes as ammunition to kill the target we actually need to kill, and then reset the room to fix the gate that unblocked our path, because the other gate will stay open. So yeah, we went for those 2 keys. At the end of this area, there's going to be a boss fight that we are going to skip. The way you skip the boss fights in this game are you just, without fully walking into the arena, you get some ammunition and you use it to attack the boss. And then you walk into the arena while the boss is in its hit stun, and it can't activate its text or block the exits. And you can get to just walk right past, just like that. And Mysterio Weasel's done. We get a brief little cutscene at the end of each of these. Obviously, you can't read any of the text because it's going by too fast. Yeah. So, like I mentioned previously, there are... To actually progress the mid part of the game, we need all 12 cards that you can get in the early parts of the game. So we're working on the 4 that you get in the city. And we're also going to need 200 dust between the tank, 1, 2, 3, and the prism. The tank being what we carry around with us, and the prism being the big structure in the center. What that entails is upgrading the prism at least twice. It starts being able to hold 50. Each time you upgrade it, it holds another 50. And then turning in dust a couple of times, because your tank can only hold 90. So if you don't turn in dust ever, you're only going to have 90 in your tank, you're going to have nothing in the prism, and you'll have to turn in that dust and grind out another 110. So we have to make periodic pit stops. We're going to be doing one such pit stop at the end of this section, which is Brand Malignant. Speaking of Brand Malignant, we're here. This is Brand Malignant. The theme here is fire. There are fire slimes, there are fire shooters, there's fire that pops out of the ground, there's standing fire that you have to put out by shooting it with a water slime. You get the idea. There's also a lot of precise movement that we do for fast cycles. Since the way cycles work in this game is the first time you enter a room, it's always going to be in the same position. But if you come back after having entered the room once, it'll be in the position you left it in. So some of these rooms, you got to get it right the first time, or else you just missed the fast cycle, and you just keep going. But we got fast cycles all through there, so that's pretty good. We've got our first key. We, of course, need to go get a second key on the other path. So here's the water slime that I mentioned. Here it's faster to just face tank some fire instead of actually trying to go get that water slime. There's another room where you gotta act fast to get it in 2 fire shots, which we did. Very good. Here's our second key, and we climb back down. The boss of this section is theoretically skippable, but the actual alignment, there's not a convenient setup for it. I think it's sub-pixel perfect. Yeah, I didn't get it there. It's free to go for, but once you fail it, you fail it. And, well, if I hadn't missed that shot there, defeating the boss just normally is not that long, so you don't save that much time by getting it. Which I think is part of why no one has really gone deep on figuring out how to get that consistently. Anyways, that's Brand Malignant. Now, as I mentioned, we're going to be going and turning in dust, and we're going to do that by going back to that platform full of debug triggers again, so that we can turn in dust and upgrade the prism at the same time. And that involves a little bit of tricky maneuvering. 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, 7, and also a really big pause float. So that's what we're in the middle of right now. That's 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, followed by a pause glide. Although not much of one, because I went a little bit higher than I needed to. Nope, I already have my settings correct. And yeah, I turned off text skip again because in order to get credit for both of these cutscenes that we're stacking together, we actually need to let one of them stall for a little bit so that it doesn't end too soon. But that should be good. I'll turn text skip back on in a little bit, and we won't need to mess with our settings again for the rest of the run. We're going over here to Gustine Pelham, the theme of which is tongues. It's another little pause float there that also gives you time to reset your settings. So yeah, Gustine Pelham. Made of flesh, which, I mean, aren't we all, but by the same token, not like that. Thankfully, the interior of Gustine Pelham is a lot more cartoony than the exterior. The gameplay gimmick here, as I mentioned, is tongues, which are essentially just levers that you can pull on to retract certain walls or extend certain walls. So there's a lot of go pull this lever, okay, now run through this slowly closing wall, so on and so forth. You'll see what I mean once we actually get into it here. So yeah, pull on that, the wall extends, you let go, it starts de-extending. Some of them stay instead of re-extending. And yeah, section's fairly straightforward. There's some slick movement we do in a room coming up to get a really fast kill, but other than that, it's pretty standard. Oh yeah, there we have to lick a taste bud, because that's just how this game is sometimes. That room can be a little bit tricky if you don't bait the spikes correctly. They can corner you in the upper right corner and just waste a lot of your time. Maybe even kill you if you're unlucky / clumsy. Okay, I'm gonna set up for this, and there we go. That was the fast kill I mentioned. Coming up here, we have another boss. There is no way to skip this boss. Just the wall in the middle of the arena would block your shot, even if you could get something without entering the room. So, yeah, it just can't be done, unfortunately. But that is the end of Gustine Pelham. I'm gonna scroll my notes over here. Coming up next is Great Guam, who is... Oh, really? Okay. I'm not complaining that that is that much faster than my average time. I'm just a little surprised. Like I said, Great Guam. Where am I at with Great Guam? Right. So one last glitch to explain in this game. It's called ride scale clipping. This car form that we're in right now, it's called ride scale, and its hitbox is larger than your person hitbox. So if I do this, wedge myself in that corner and turn into a car as I'm moving the camera around, I can clip right through the wall. We really only use that to get into and out of this area, which you'd otherwise have to navigate this maze for a bit, which obviously takes a lot more time. It used to be more important to the run before the pause float was discovered. Actually, I guess it didn't change that much. There's really only one other spot where we would have used it. Which is weird, because you would think a trick for clipping through walls to get out of bounds would be super important. But it turns out... It honestly just turns out that the the 3D sections, which is where the glitches are not really where you save or even spend the most time. And the 2D sections are very tight in terms of not really having glitches available. Aside from the boss skips, it's basically just playing as intended. Anyways, here's Great Guam. Really, the only new gimmick is these new enemies that are introduced, the mini Guams. If you walk over them, they'll poke their heads out, at which point you can actually inhale them / attack them. But otherwise, they're fairly standard. And it also means you can safely walk over them at first. Up here, we've got a couple of darkness gimmick rooms in a row. So the way these dark rooms work is they're actually the exact same as the light rooms above them, except for these red ropes are removed so you can actually progress. And sometimes a couple of extra sprites are added. So it's just a case of memorize the room layout before you go in, and then do whatever the game asks you and get back out. Fairly straightforward. The end of this, we're going to do another boss skip. We've, in fact, fought our last boss until the final boss of the game, because these sections just stop having bosses after the first area. So yeah, we're going to go down here, and here's our boss. Ooh. It's okay. Ooh, come on. Okay. That mini Guam kept knocking me out of the arena. That's mildly obnoxious, but at least it was knocking me out of the arena and not into the arena, which would have been a lot worse. And yeah, that's Great Guam. That completes the first part of the game, the Center City C-Note. This is where, if you're playing casually, you would now turn in these 4 cards to upgrade the prism, fill it up to 100 dust, and use that to clear the storm so you could actually leave the city. And when you do that, you get an upgraded vacuum cleaner. We already have all that. So here's another ride skill clip, by the way. And there's a pause glide coming up, so photosensitivity warning here. So we're going to skip turning any of that in, because we don't need to. And we're just going to turn in our dust here at our normal dust drop-off spot. We now have 144 dust. Okay, a little bit more than that because I picked up some extra. Which means a full tank will get us over the 200 line. We don't have to worry about dust anymore. We're also going to drive into a little cutscene here. And then coming up is the most important pause glide in the game. But before we get that, so the second section of this game, you're exploring this area called Blue Veil, which is the part that we're in now. And the thing about Blue Veil is there's only 3 2D sections. 2. But there are a couple of them have more than 1 card. And there are some cards in the 3D world. 1, 2, 3. Like that one we just got in the roof of that car wash. And now pause glide. And that just skipped a rhythm minigame, among other things. So normally, the way you would get to this area is you would drop down into the pit below, and you talk to an NPC there, and you do the normal, you spark the NPC, you do a rhythm minigame, and you get to here. And then we're going to go through this area. You can see it's this kind of quiet, dead version of this area. There is actually an alive version. We're going to go through this area 2 times. And when we finish, we're going to come out the first time on top of that structure that I just floated to the top of. And then normally you'd do some platforming on that structure, you'd be at the top, and then you'd enter where we just entered. Instead, by entering at the top immediately, we still get to the dead version of this area, which is good because we still need to do this twice. but we skip the rhythm minigame, and we'll still get transported back to the top, so we can still do everything it is we need to do. So here we are on that structure of rocks, and I'm just going to do another pause float here. 1, 2, 3, 4. And this is the same place we just entered, but with a worse camera angle. Again, not the dev's fault, because you're not supposed to be able to just jump and float infinitely wherever. And here's the living version of this area. We have to talk to all the NPCs that used to be gravestones. There's going to be some extra NPCs. We don't care about those. And you'll also notice we have this key following us. We got it on our first trip through, and we're spending it here on our second trip through, because it's further down the structure, so no point in doubling back. And of course, we're going over here because over here is a card. And like I said earlier, we need every single card in the game. So there's our card. We can backtrack and go back up this structure. Again, gotta talk to the right NPCs. We can ignore those NPCs. Gotta talk to this one. And at this point, it's just talking to a bunch of NPCs and walking to the end. The other thing is you have to make sure you actually get the cards on this trip. Because of the trick that we did, we can't enter this section again in the normal way because we never entered it that way in the first place. So we have to do it like this. Thankfully, that's not hard to do. But yeah, for some reason we didn't get that card there, we'd actually be soft locked out of the rest of the game. Alright. And this is now down in the bottom of the pit where we were supposed to come the first time. I'm just gonna quickly jump up this wall. And we're going to take the highway over to our next card. We're heading to our next 2D section, but on the way we're going to make a pit stop at this waterfall here because there is a secret behind the waterfall, as one would expect in a video game. So we're going to do a pause float followed by a pause glide. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Pause glide. Open this, pause float, 1, 2, 3, pause glide. Bada bing, bada bang, bada boom. And now we're going to drive through this railing, which is just a suggestion, float over that tree root, and drive into a lake. We are good drivers. Alright. So we are now on our way to Iwasaki Antimon. You might have noticed I'm not turning into a car here. Oh, that's because I can't. Basically, it's faster to be in a car basically always. So if you see me not in a car, assume I can't be in a car. And you'll be right basically all the time. Anyways, here's Iwasaki Antimon. Of course, we have another rhythm minigame. They've added a complication to the rhythm minigame, which is there are now these black crystals, which you just have to neutral the D-pad for. Just like that. Iwasaki Antimon. The theme here is, well, it's going to be pretty obvious as soon as we get in, but it's snow and ice. And what that practically means is we have a couple of ice spike enemies with orbiting ice cubes. We have some snow slimes, and then we have one of the most threatening enemies in the game, secretly, which are snowmen. Snowmen are actually some of the most dangerous enemies in this game, at least in my opinion, because they will chase you relentlessly, and they explode on contact. They're kind of fast, and if they hit you, they do 2 points of damage compared to 1 point, like everything else in the game. I turned away too soon. I think I would have actually been fine walking through that enemy's orbit otherwise. So yeah, those are the snowmen. They aren't quite as fast as you. You can outrun them, but they maneuver pretty well and will catch you if you're not careful. Or like here, if you're not careful, you can wake that one up. Thankfully, you can hide here while the key animation is playing out and not get hit by the snowman. Anyways, we picked up a couple of keys. One of them is actually bonus key. The end of this area is up to the left, but we have to double back down to get another card. Because, again, we need every single card we can get our hands on. This is one of the spots in the game where health can get a little dicey if you're not careful. I sometimes, if I'm low on health, will take a safety save at the top of that right section. Because it's just... So, in addition to being a save where you can respawn from if you do die, every save point will fully heal you as well. So, it makes it extra safe. We do have to make a slight detour back into 3D here. And with that, we are done with Iwasaki Antimon. The best part of Iwasaki Antimon is it has the same cadence as Camptown Ladies. So you can go Iwasaki Antimon, doo-da, doo-da. Iwasaki Antimon, all the doo-da day. Yeah, we're just gonna walk back out of this 2D area now, or this 3D area now. I remember to neutral the control stick as you go through that camera transition, because otherwise your controls will get really screwy for a little bit. We're gonna pop out over here. We've got to make one more detour before our next and final 2D section of this area. For, you guessed it, another card. This will be card 7 of 8 in Blue Veil. 1, 2. Open that. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Hog glide. And here we are. Just real quick, nice and easy. Just float and glide over a mountain. No big deal. This is Clonway Jonstein. Although perhaps it's Cloneway, because it's Lawnway Jonstein's quote-unquote brother. If my hands weren't occupied, I'd be doing air quotes. Brother. Definitely a robot. Also kind of a clone. This is, in my opinion, the hardest 2D section to do fast in Blue Veil. The gimmick here is you have a shadow clone that will mirror your movements on the opposite side of the screen from you. And what that entails is, so it looks like this. It's responsible for pushing shadow buttons. It'll die if it goes in the red jam. And it can turn spikes into shadow spikes. And the shadow spikes will hunt you down and push shadow buttons. But they will also die if they touch the red jam. So you can see these first 4 rooms basically introduce all the concepts we're going to use here. And the reason why I say this is the hardest one to, at least to speedrun, is just there's a lot of precise movements And a single mistake usually means you have to reset the entire room. Oh yeah. Each of these sections ends with the section where if you try to just move towards the exit, the shadow clone will get in your way and you'll bounce off of each other. So there I had to go up into the upper left corner to intentionally dunk the clone into the upper right corner spot. We've got teleporters now. Here we're leaving and re-entering so that our clone comes in from the correct side. Push the button. This room tends to trip me up. If you just walk too fast coming from the previous room, you'll just immediately dunk your clone in the red goop and have a bad time. Would not recommend. Here's another spot where the clone would get in our way, so we have to clear out all those boxes so we can get to the opposite spot of the red goop. Alright, I gotta remember not to do that, because there's a third of a second delay between what I hear and what you hear. So I apologize for that, because that sounded awful, I'm sure. Alright, go up here, push the button, and push that button. I can't help it though, this is one of my favorite tunes in this game. It's very catchy. So here we have to be careful not to turn the spikes into shadow spikes, because shadow spikes are invincible except to red goop, and there is no red goop here. And then finally we have something on a bit of a timer. I came in a bad spot of the cycle, but I have not been consistent enough with that area to tell where in the cycle I'm going to be when I come in. Because that cycle moves fairly quickly. I mean, it doesn't make a big difference. You can just wait the cycle, and it's not a big deal. Also, Clonway says trans rights. And, yeah. And there we go. That's Clonway. That is our 8th card of Blue Veil. And that is our 12th card of the early and mid parts of the game. We're actually only going to be picking up one more card this game, because there's only one more that's required. And now we're heading into a section wherein our main character here, Nova, is going to have something of a bad time. 1, 2... Oh, I got caught. 1, 2. Okay. And what that entails is we're going to be slowed down and staggering for a little bit when we first pop out of this cutscene. We're going to fall over. We're going to get back to our feet. We're going to take 8 steps slowly, and during those 8 steps, we cannot turn into a car. It will fail. And then after those 8 steps are done, we can turn back into a car normally. But there's a catch. We are on a timer. And when that timer runs out, it's an invisible timer. When it runs out, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. When it runs out, you will automatically drop out of car form and stagger and fall over again. But it resets every time you screen transition. So our goal here is to get through this screen without dropping out of car form, which is actually kind of difficult to do. You have to do some relatively precise movements and be pretty quick. It looks like I just barely made it, which is about what you do. Pause spam to get over this rail. And we are through that section. Yeah, your movement through those screens needs to be kind of precise in order to not drop out of car form ever. You are forced out of car form for this cutscene. So we're going to watch this cutscene, and at the end of this cutscene, we're going to fall over again. We're going to get back to our feet. We're going to take 8 more slow steps, and then we're going to be able to turn into a car again after that. And our destination is that tower in the distance. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And the thing is, to get through the door, you also have to drop out of car form. And in fact, we can't be a car anymore at this point. So I'm just going to mash the open door button. We're going to fall over here again. And we're just going to walk to the sigil and interact with it. And that flips the gravity in the tower. So now we can fall up the tower. It does a little bend here. Again, we want to make sure not to be walking along the ground because that will increment our timer. That forces us to fall over again. And then here, we're going to do a jump at a specific spot so that we make it through the door before falling over. And then I'm going to do a pause float here. 5. Some pause the glides, get back to the center. Interact with this. And we're trying to enter this fruit, but oh no, it's going to be eaten by a dog. So instead, we're going to enter a dog. The dog, it looks like it makes random movements, but it always jumps to the same spot in the same order, so as long as you know it, you're good. And with that, we have made it into Dustbound Village. Dustbound Village is an extended 2D section where basically things change a bit. The first thing I want to talk about, though, is 2D cutscene displacement. When you go from a 2D cutscene like this one to another 2D cutscene like the one we're about to load into, and if you hold buttons on the D-pad while you're loading between those two cutscenes, your character will move from their spot before they get locked into place for the cutscene, which means you can get a head start on your movement. So I should have started next to the bed here, and instead I started much further to the dark bottom right, which is where I needed to go. We're going to do that a couple more times. It's relatively minor. It just gets you a head start. The next time we do it is going to be more important because for plot reasons, we're going to be a lot slower. But we're not slower during our between cutscene movement. So we get a significant head start. In any case, this is Dustbound Village. So the thing about Dustbound Village is after some traumatic experiences, our main character Nova is attempting to start a new life here in Dustbound Village. And the way that plays out in gameplay is we're going to be starting a new routine, which means we're going to be going through 3 different types of segments multiple times. There are gardening segments, there are ritual segments, and there are wrestling segments. So after this introduction to the area where we just walk all over the place, we're going to go into our first gardening section. Well, first I need to do that cutscene spawn displacement I talked about. And you can see we're much slower here, so that head start is very useful. Thankfully, we only need to make it to this NPC, whose name is Drem, and talk to him. And now we can get started on the first gardening segment. The gardening segments are basically the 2D gameplay you're already used to. Go through a series of rooms, defeat all the enemies, yada yada. It's the most similar to the gameplay we've already had. It's called gardening because you're dealing with these weed enemies that are invading the gardens. Just like that. Next up is our first ritual segment. So that shrine you saw us at just a moment ago, we're going to head back there, which means heading back here to the train station, where we can take the train. Take the train. And this takes us to our shrine, our temple. The ritual is we roll the dice, we cross the rickety bridge, and we send a sacrifice down the slide. And the result of the die roll and the thing we send down the slide is going to be different each time, but it's essentially the exact same actions otherwise. But now we have our first wrestling segment. And these are essentially, they're kind of like boss fights, but they're gimmicky boss fights. We're trying to do fake hits, so you can see I'm kind of aiming near my target, because I find that easier than actually hitting the target. What you're supposed to do is you hold down the shoot button, and when you let go of the shoot button, your shot disappears, and if it disappears close to the target, that's what you're looking for. You don't want to hit the target, and you don't want to go stop too early either. We're trying to fill up the meter on the left side, which indicates how happy the audience is. This was a quick time event section, and now we're going to do just a quick back and forth, and we're done. That was Wrestling 1. So there are 2 gardening segments. We're about to do our second right now. There are 3 rituals, and there are 3 wrestling segments. That one just has a lot of enemies in the center, and it's just how quickly can you deal with all of them. And here we go. So yeah, this is our last gardening segment. We're going to do some more rituals and some more wrestling, and it'll be a good time. I call it a wrestling segment because it's staged combat in front of an audience. So it's clearly meant to evoke that, even if you are still using sort of normal game mechanics. The wrestling segments are the most interesting part of Dustbound Village in terms of figuring out how to do them quickly. We're just getting good at, not so much figuring out how to do them quickly, but getting good at doing them quickly. I'm a little bit out of practice, apparently. Alright, now we've got another quick time event. Down, right, B, left, B. If you're paying attention to the meter on this one, it always ends with a Y press. So like there I just started mashing Y. Can't just tap the button. Okay, give me that chair. Give me that chair. Give me that chair. Okay. That was a little bit sloppy, but could stand to practice that a little bit more, I guess. Anyways, we've got some cutscene here. It's going to lead us into the third and final ritual section. I don't have a lot to add at this point. I'm going to give my voice a rest for a little bit because I've been talking kind of nonstop through this. Definitely, if this is in a marathon, I can talk less and give more time to, you know, the hosts, all that. But I'm just trying to keep this entertaining to watch without all of the trappings of a marathon going on around it. Anyways, we are on our way to the third ritual section. Once again, we are going to roll the dice. We're going to cross the rickety bridge, and we're going to send some kind of sacrifice down the slide. Where this time that sacrifice is ourselves. We Anyways, that's going to lead us into the third and final wrestling segment, and that's going to be essentially the end of Dustbound Village. At the end of this is the longest cutscene in the game, so there's going to be a bit of that. We do have, let's see, right, quick time event, up, left, down, B, Y, and then finally, this is what I call the DDD section for reasons that are obvious if you've played any Kirby game. If you're really quick on that, you can get it in 2 shots. And the last is a bit of energy tennis that we cheese by just spamming the reflect button. And like I said, this is now the longest cutscene of the game. Good place to get up, take a stretch break. Stretch those legs. Stretch your arms. Stretch your everything. We're a little bit more than halfway through the run. Overall run. My PB. Actually, let's look at that. Okay, we're clearly a bit behind my PB, but my PB is 1:15:55. But we're still on a very good pace here. I'm pretty happy with how this is going so far. I am going to be splitting here in a minute, but there is still more to this cutscene. Hang on. I use an audio cue to know when to split there, so that I split at consistently the same time. Again, obviously not something that's relevant to Marathon Run, where we're not going to have splits running, but just explaining my process. You might have noticed the next split up here is called Dust Grind. So for the end of the game, we now need 2 things to unlock the final section. What we need are a complete collar, and we need 150 dust. We need 150 dust in the prism. Our tank, our vacuum tank, only holds 90. So that means we have to turn in dust at least twice. So what we're going to go do right now is go grind 60 dust and turn it in, so that at the very end of the game, we can come back with a full tank of 90 dust and be ready to complete the game. So we're just going to pop back over to Conway over here, because that's the most convenient spot to grind dust. I've got another pause glide coming up here. And just drive up here, drive off its wall. Pause glide over that gate. 1, 2. And head right on in. So yeah, we're just going to do a quick little dust grind up to 60, and then go turn that in, and then we can get on with the actual end game here. And we're just going to grind it in this room by switching over and over. This can be a little bit RNG, but it's not an excessive amount of RNG. It usually only takes like a few minutes, if that. $56. Nope, nope. Please go into the next room. Actually reset that room. And 61. Since dust at this point in the game comes in like groups of 2 and 3, it's unlikely that you're actually going to get exactly 60. And it is technically like a few frames of time lost to have extra dust at the end, but It's not really a big deal, and you can't really control it anyway. So 1, 2. Now we're just going to go turn this in, and we can get on with the rest of the game. So for the rest of the game, I mentioned we also need a complete color. And a color is made of 3 color pieces and a color base. Now the color base is always in the same spot, but the 3 color pieces are in 3 of 5 spots, and it's whichever 3 you choose to go to first. So obviously we know where all the spots are. We're going to go do the 3 spots that are the fastest. And the first one of those is going to be Desert NPC. And Desert NPC is a little bit unusual because the collar piece is right at the beginning, but as soon as you enter the area, you're locked in and you have to finish it. So we have to do the complete area from start to finish. That said, it's not very long. It's also extraordinarily unusual, so prepare for things to get a little strange. Just fair warning. Talking to those trees is set up for a future segment, but for now, we are going to meet the dolphin. And we, of course, started off with a rhythm minigame. Or at least something that looks like a rhythm minigame. If you are sitting here thinking to yourself, this looks weird, this doesn't look right, something's wrong here, good job, you're correct. Anyways, meet the dolphin. We have met the dolphin. Welcome to Desert NPC, also known as No Such Scene. That chime there means that chest had a collar piece in it. So listen for that chime to happen 2 more times. And now this. I don't really know how to describe this section, so I'm just going to let it play out. Other than we're now playing a completely different game. This is Nora. Welcome to her boring life. And I say that because that's the name of the track that is playing right now in the soundtrack for this game. Left, up. This is a bit of a maze to get through. If you go the wrong way too many times, it'll take pity on you and just kind of spit you out. But if you go the right way, you can get out faster. There we go. So yeah, we left the apartment. We did our normal day business. We get back to our apartment. We're going to check social media and we're going to go to bed. And we're going to wake up the next morning. And there was a thunderstorm overnight. And we're going to go look out the window. And we're going to see that the gargoyle that was on the corner of the building is now missing. That's strange. I'm sure that's fine. Oh, look, that same gargoyle is in front of our house. In front of our apartment door, rather. Weird. Let's check social media. And let's go to bed. And now what would normally follow is an Oscod horror section in this game. But the developers were kind enough to understand, hey, this is completely unlike anything else that's in this game. This may not be what you signed up for. So they give you an option to just skip that part. Turns out skipping that part also way faster because you just don't do a part of the game. So we're also going to skip it. So we're just going to climb out fire escape and be done. There we go. Okay. The other 2 color pieces are going to be a lot easier to get. We're not we're going to go into two different 2D areas and grab a collar piece and then immediately dip back out. The two places we're not going to are places where we have to complete an entire 2D section, and they're long 2D sections. So it's pretty clear which 3 of the 5 locations are fastest. This next one is Orb. Orb sector something dash something dash something that I forgot. 4-16-5. It's in my splits. Oddly enough, this is one of the few 2D sections in the game that doesn't have a rhythm minigame before it. Relatedly, there are actually no enemies or conflicts in this section. There is, however, a fashion minigame. Sadly, we are not going to be playing the fashion minigame. We just need to talk to that NPC to unlock the 3rd floor here. And normally the way you do this section is you talk to the fashion NPC, they unlock a floor of the building, you go talk to all the doors on that floor, you get a fashion order from someone, you go back to the fashion shop, build them their order, and then that unlocks another floor, and you repeat until you get to the last floor. Instead, we unlocked the 3rd floor, the collar piece was at the end of the 3rd floor, we grabbed it, we're leaving. And then, finally, our last collar piece is in New Zealand. So first of all, you will have noticed that I've been talking to some trees in this desert section over here. You have to talk to these 5 tree NPCs in the correct order. As you talk to each one, it'll point you to the next one if you wait for the animations to play out. But it's always the same order, so we just route them in as it's convenient. And so that was tree number 4, and this is tree number 5. And now we're going to do one last rhythm mini game. This is the last one in the game, so enjoy it while it lasts. There's technically one more you could get, but it's in an area that we're skipping. And we're skipping it because it's one of those areas that you could get a collar piece there, but you'd have to beat the entire area. Otherwise, there's a couple of cards there, but we no longer care about cards. You need the cards for the bad ending, or if you're just doing the all cards route category, rather. Anyways, this section that we're in may look oddly familiar to you if you've played Anodyne 1. And if you want me to explain how Anodyne 1 and Anodyne 2 are related, that's a good question. I would also like to know the answer, and I've played both the games. It's very fuzzy other than them sharing a name and having a couple of references in Anodyne 2 to Anodyne 1 stuff. There's some post-game secret stuff that attempts to explain more of it, but I find just raises more questions than it answers. But I digress. This is New Zealand. Like I said, we're just here for a collar piece, but we're also here for another reason. You might have noticed, hey, I don't have a full tank of dust yet. And didn't you say you needed a full tank of dust? You are correct. This is where we're going to get it. In this room. For obvious reasons. Usually takes about 2 clears of the room. Oh, I got a little bit unlucky there. I need to dip in a 3rd time. Okay. 90 dust. And with that, we can leave. We're just going to walk back out. And with that, we're pretty much ready to trigger the end game. So we now need to go turn all those collar pieces in and assemble a collar. First, we need to grab that collar base. Like I said, it's always at the same spot. Pause glide. Here, on this structure. And we need to go turn all those things in and basically talk to some NPCs who are going to give us the idea of what we need to do to actually trigger the good ending of this game. Basically, talk to some NPCs who are going to talk some sense into us and tell us, hey, the center sanctuary you've been working for this entire game. I recognize I haven't talked much about the story of the game, but those guys, they're actually the bad guys, and maybe you should do something about that. And that's what we're gonna do. And the way we're gonna do it is we're gonna go back here, and we're going to revisit Dustbound Village. Except Dustbound Village is not quite the same as it used to be. So first of all, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Ooh. We need to pet the dog. And if the dog's so nice, we need to pet it twice. We put the collar on it, and that forms enough of a connection that we can actually re-enter this dog. Because this is the same dog that ate our fruit earlier and contained Dustbound Village within. The thing is, you might have noticed, Dustbound Village has been cleaned up. And if you go talk to all the NPCs, none of the NPCs have any memory of you. Except for this one, who used some magic dust powers to avoid whatever it is that happened here. But this conversation is what gives us the idea that, hey, the center may not be the good guys, and maybe we should do something about that. So let's go do something about that. Got a little bit more cutscene here. And we're basically at the end of the game now. We're just going to climb back down this tower, head back to the center, turn in our dust, and enter the final 2D section of the game, which is capped off. Of course, it is the longest and most difficult 2D section of the game, capped off by the final boss, which is honestly probably one of the hardest things in this game, which is probably what you would expect. And honestly, I wouldn't have it any other way. One of the reasons I prefer the good ending speedrun to the bad ending speedrun is the bad ending speedrun replaces this final dungeon with, hey, get all the cards and then grind up to 350 dust so you can trigger the bad ending. And that's just not as interesting. So yeah, we're just going back to the center here. Those rails are just a suggestion. Here we go. Turn in our dust. We should have at least 150 dust. We should have 151 because we've got 61 earlier. And that extra few frames ticking up is the few frames I mentioned that we technically lost by getting 151. That's a bunch of diabolic boxes just asking you, like, hey, are you sure you want to do this? No, really, are you sure? But are you sure? Just hammer through and answer yes as quickly as possible. Of course, it's always the second option, so you have to go down F, down A, down confirm. You know what I mean? Repeatedly. And the reason we needed that dust is to cushion our fall as we dive into the dust pillar. and then use the dust that we absorbed into our bodies, question mark? I'm not clear on exactly the plot here, but um, we're looking at the face of our replacement, and we are sparking a connection, and we have entered our replacement to try and destroy the 3 elements of nurturing that we collected at the very beginning of the game. So, Nano Cleaner Zera, longest and hardest 2D section of the game, introducing some new gimmicks. We've got those pink spikes. We've got these bubbled enemies. We've got boomerang enemies. They work like you think they work. That's pretty much it. And yeah, those 3 gates represent the 3 elements of nurturing. We need to destroy those 3 elements in order to get out of here quickly, or to get to the final boss. I'm losing my train of thought. Like I said, this is one of the hardest parts of the game. It does require some concentration. So you'll pardon me if my thoughts are a bit jumbled while I'm going through this. But yeah, each of the elements of nurturing is locked behind a key, so we also need to collect 3 keys while we're here. So that's what we're doing first. It's collecting these first 2 keys. There, you gotta be careful to not let the shooter walk into the pink spikes, because it will be destroyed. And it's the only way you have to defeat spiked enemies in that room. So yeah, the bubbled enemies are completely invincible, but you can shoot them a couple of times to break the bubble, at which point you can destroy them normally. Boomerang enemies, you inhale them, you shoot them out. Like I said, they work exactly like you think they work. Like so, and wait, this is no good. I have to reset. Okay. Let's do this. Excuse me? Game? Game's giving me a hard time today. So it goes. And here's our first element of nurturing, or as I like to call them, elements of a balanced breakfast. Because this is a bowl of cereal. But yes, these are the yummy sippy cozy from the tutorial of the game way back at the beginning. We're now going to go spend the second key down here. Introduce one last gimmick. It's only used for like 3 screens. These red gates here are blood gates. You have to take damage to open them. Of course, these rooms make it difficult to take damage, so you have to figure out... They're essentially little puzzles you have to solve on how to take damage. Or like here, it's just, can you walk around the structure in time before the snowman's timer runs out? If you do them all right, you have exactly enough health. This is the temperature regulator element of nurturing. Because you don't want to be too hot or too cold when you have your breakfast. So it's part of a balanced breakfast. Yes, I know it's a stretch. Don't at me. Here we're going to use this. Oh, we're going to try. Excuse me. Pardon. Go. Game does not want to cooperate today. Anyways, we're using that bubbled enemy as a shield, because otherwise that shooter would just obliterate us. Now we've got our last key. You know, we can just stun the shooter long enough for us to get by. And now we just have to backtrack back to the first set of gates and go to the right. You can see 2 of those gates have opened up. Spend our last key. That room presents a moral dilemma that does not actually matter from a gameplay perspective. You just have to destroy one of the 2 enemies to get out. And here's our third and final element of a balanced breakfast, a bottle of milk. And with that, we are basically done with the game, except for the final boss. The final boss, one of the harder challenges in the game, we are going to go for something called a 6 cycle. So the outer section of the final boss will extend a big spike ball on an arm to try and hit you. And when it does that, a weak point is revealed and you need to shoot that weak point a bunch. We're trying to have it to finish this boss fight in 6 punches, 2 for each phase, because there are 3 phases. It gets progressively harder because the arm stays extended for shorter periods of time in each phase. But there we go, we got 2 cycles there. Shoot that ball into the main core, and we enter it to get to the inner part. The inner part, we're trying to shoot these spikes into the thing moving along the top. They always come out at the same positions with the same timing, so getting 6 hits is pretty easy. Alright, and that was phase 1. Phase 2 adds a fire shooter. Okay, got the 2 cycle there. Now the thing at the top will shoot us. And I'm missing all my shots. Okay. 1, 2, 3. I'm gonna have to improvise here because I don't know where the shots are coming from anymore. There we go. Fine. This is phase 3. You gotta watch out for that the punch, because that does 2 points of damage. Again, almost everything else in the game does 1 point of damage. Okay, so didn't quite get the 6 cycle there. It's really hard on the last phase. I'm gonna play it a little bit safe and make sure I don't die, because I wouldn't want to die here and have to restart the final boss fight. But we are just about done. We've got one more thing here. Now the 2 halves of the floor are going to light up. And damage you, and we are done. There's going to be a horrible screeching noise coming up in just a second, and then time is when the last text box disappears from the screen and it starts to fade to black. So, horrible screeching noise. Time. And that is Anodyne 2 Return to Dust in hour 17, 7 seconds. Yeah, that's the game. If you're still watching along on YouTube, thank you. Thank you for taking the time to consider this for whatever marathon I've submitted it for, because I'm probably going to use this for a couple of marathons coming up shortly. But again, thank you for your consideration. We can sit here and watch the credits. I'm going to sit here and watch the credits. I don't know if I'm going to cut this out of the YouTube video or not, but you'll know shortly, because I'll cut or not. If you're doing an all cards run of this the all cards category of this game, you are generally required to sit through the credits, load back into your save file, and show that you actually have all the cards. Obviously, for any percent, that doesn't really matter. Just confirm that you actually beat the game, which, yes, we did. We did it. Hooray. So yeah, for marathon purposes, you would cut here, or a few minutes ago, or a few, you know what I mean. That's all I got. Thank you for joining me, and I will maybe be coming to a marathon near you sometime soon. Bye.